The grand concert hall stood silent in the late afternoon, its polished floors reflecting the amber light streaming through tall windows. Natasha Quinn adjusted the strap of her violin case as she stepped into the space, her breath catching at the magnificence surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and rows of velvet seats faced an elevated stage where a pristine grand piano waited. She had been invited here by Damian Sterling himself, the enigmatic entrepreneur who had built a fortune in technology but maintained a private passion for classical music. His reputation preceded him: brilliant, demanding, and impossibly selective about the musicians he supported through his foundation. Natasha wore a simple navy dress that hugged her figure modestly, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. At 26, she had devoted her entire life to music, practicing until her fingers ached, performing in small venues, dreaming of the recognition that always seemed just beyond reach. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, and she turned to see him approaching. Damian Sterling moved with quiet confidence, his tall frame clad in dark trousers and a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and when his intense blue eyes met hers, Natasha felt something shift in her chest. "Miss Quinn," he said, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to resonate through the empty space. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." She extended her hand professionally, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Mr. Sterling, the honor is mine. Your concert hall is breathtaking." When their hands touched, warmth spread through her palm and up her arm. His grip was firm, but gentle, and he held on for a moment longer than necessary, his gaze searching her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Please? Call me Damian," he said, releasing her hand slowly. "I have been following your career for some time. Your interpretation of Tchaikovsky last month was remarkable. You played with such emotion, such vulnerability. It moved me deeply." Natasha felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You were there? I had no idea." "I prefer to observe without announcing myself," he admitted, a slight smile playing at his lips. "It allows me to experience the music without the performance being altered by my presence." He gestured toward the stage, and they walked together, their footsteps synchronized. Natasha was acutely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his presence seemed to fill the space around them. "I would love to hear you play," Damian said as they reached the piano. "Not an audition, just music shared between two people who understand its power." Natasha set down her violin case and removed her instrument with practiced care. As she lifted it to her shoulder and positioned her bow, she felt his gaze on her, attentive and admiring. She began to play, choosing a piece by Brahms that had always spoken to her soul, a melody filled with longing and unfulfilled desire. As the notes filled the concert hall, she lost herself in the music, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. When she finished, silence hung in the air for a long moment before Damian spoke. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly, moving closer. "You play like someone who understands heartache intimate." Natasha lowered her violin, surprised by the observation. "Music has always been easier for me than real life. I can express through notes what I cannot seem to find in words or actions." "What would you express if you could?" His question was gentle but probing. She hesitated, then found herself speaking with unusual honesty. "That I feel like I'm watching life through a window instead of living it. I see other people experiencing passion, connection, intimacy, and I wonder if something is wrong with me because I have never allowed myself those things." Damian stepped even closer, his expression softening with understanding rather than judgment. "There is nothing wrong with you, Natasha. Some people guard their hearts carefully because they understand their value. That kind of caution is wisdom, a weakness. Is it wisdom, though?" She met his gaze directly, emboldened by something she saw in his eyes. "Or is it fear? I am 26 years old, and I have never been kissed. I have never been held by someone who wanted me for more than my talent. I have never experienced what it feels like to be desired as a woman rather than admired as a musician." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Natasha expected to see pity or discomfort in his expression, but instead, she saw something that made her breath catch: hunger mixed with tenderness. Desire tempered by respect. Natasha, Damien said, his voice dropping lower. May I tell you what I see when I look at you? She nodded, unable to speak. I see a woman of incredible strength, who has chosen to pour her passion into her art, rather than squander it on people unworthy of receiving it. I see beauty that takes my breath away, intelligence that challenges me, and a capacity for feeling that most people spend their entire lives trying to access. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face. And I see someone I want to know in every possible way. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Damien, I should tell you that I do not know how to do this. I have no experience with romance or intimacy. I would not know how to be what you need. You already are, he whispered, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with exquisite gentleness. Your honesty, your vulnerability, your trust in sharing this with me. These are the most precious gifts anyone has ever given me. I am scared, she admitted, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and rapid beneath her palms. So am I, he confessed. Because I have never felt anything like what I am feeling right now. This connection between us, it terrifies me as much as it draws me in. Natasha looked up at him, seeing her own uncertainty and desire reflected in his eyes. Will you show me? She asked softly. Will you teach me what I have been missing? Instead of answering with words, Damien lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to refuse. When their lips finally met, Natasha felt the world shift beneath her feet. The kiss was tender at first, exploratory, his mouth moving against hers with patient skill. She responded instinctively, her fingers curling into his shirt as sensation flooded through her. When he deepened the kiss, his arms wrapping around her waist to pull her closer, Natasha melted against him with the soft sound of pleasure that surprised them both. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard. Natasha touched her lips in wonder, her eyes wide with amazement. That was my first kiss, she whispered. The first of many, Damien promised, his voice rough with restrained passion. Natasha, I want to show you everything you have been denying yourself. I want to worship you the way you deserve, teach you pleasure, make you understand how extraordinary you are. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity along with desire. In that moment, standing in the golden light of the concert hall, with her violin forgotten beside them, Natasha made a choice. She chose to trust, to risk, to finally step through the window she had been watching life through for so long. Yes, she breathed, pulling him down for another kiss. Show me everything. Damien took her hand gently, his fingers intertwining with hers as he led her away from the stage. They walked through the concert hall in comfortable silence, the weight of what was about to happen hanging between them like a promise. Natasha's heart raced, but she felt no urge to pull away. Something about Damien made her feel safe, even as she stepped into completely unknown territory. He guided her to a private elevator concealed behind dark wood paneling. As the doors closed around them, Damien turned to face her, his back against the wall, studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. Are you certain about this? He asked, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of her hand. We can stop at any moment. There is no pressure, no expectation. Natasha stepped closer to him, emboldened by the desire she saw in his eyes. I have spent my entire life being cautious, being careful, protecting myself from anything that might distract me from my music. But standing here with you, I realize I have been protecting myself from living. She reached up to touch his jaw, marveling at the slight stubble beneath her fingertips. I want this. I want you. I want to know what it feels like to be wanted completely. Damien caught her hand and pressed it to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. You have no idea how beautiful you are right now. The trust you are showing me, the courage it takes to be this vulnerable, it humbles me. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that took Natasha's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline as evening descended, painting everything in shades of purple and gold. The space was elegantly furnished with modern pieces that somehow felt warm and inviting rather than cold, but Natasha barely noticed the surroundings. All her attention was focused on the man beside her, whose hand still held hers as if she were something precious that might slip away. Damien led her to the windows, standing behind her so they could watch the city lights beginning to sparkle below. His arms came around her waist, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him supporting her. "I want you to know something," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "What happens between us tonight is not just about physical pleasure, though I intend to give you plenty of that. It is about connection, about showing you how it feels to be cherished." Natasha turned in his arms to face him, her hands sliding up his chest to rest on his shoulders. "Then cherish me," she whispered. "I am ready." His kiss this time was less gentle, more demanding. Damien's hands roamed her back, pulling her flush against him as his mouth explored hers with growing hunger. Natasha responded with innocent enthusiasm, learning the rhythm, discovering what made him groan softly against her lips, when his mouth left hers to trail kisses along her jaw and down her neck. Natasha gasped at the sensations flooding through her. Every nerve ending seemed alive, awakened by his touch. Her hands tangled in his hair as he found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, and she heard herself make sounds she had never made before. "That is it," Damien murmured against her skin. "Do not hold back. Let me hear what I make you feel." His hands found the zipper at the back of her dress, and he paused, looking into her eyes for permission. Natasha nodded, and slowly, reverently, he drew it down. The fabric pulled at her feet, leaving her standing in simple undergarments that suddenly felt inadequate, but the way Damien looked at her made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. His eyes darkened with desire as they traced every curve, every line of her body. "Perfect," he breathed. "You are absolutely perfect." He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the bedroom as she wrapped her arms around his neck. The room was dimly lit, decorated in soft grays and blues that felt like twilight made tangible. He laid her gently on the bed, then stepped back to remove his own shirt. Natasha watched in fascination as he revealed a body sculpted by obvious discipline. Her fingers itched to touch him, to explore the planes of muscle and warm skin. When he joined her on the bed, she reached out tentatively, her hands mapping his chest with curious touches. "You can touch me anywhere you want," Damien encouraged, catching one of her hands and kissing her palm. "There is no wrong way to do this. Just follow your instincts." As her confidence grew, so did her boldness. She traced the lines of his abdomen, feeling the muscles contract beneath her touch. When she reached the waistband of his trousers, she hesitated, and he helped her, removing the last barriers between them. Natasha felt heat flood her cheeks as she took in the sight of him completely bare. Damien was patient, letting her look, letting her adjust to this new intimacy. When she met his eyes again, she saw warmth and understanding there. "Your turn," he said softly, his hands gentle as he removed her remaining garments until she lay exposed before him. Instead of feeling vulnerable, Natasha felt powerful. The way Damien looked at her, the reverence in his touch as his hands skimmed over her skin, made her feel like a goddess being worshipped. He took his time exploring her body, his mouth following the path of his hands. Every kiss, every caress was deliberate, designed to bring her pleasure. When his lips found her breast, Natasha arched off the bed with a cry of surprise at the intense sensation. "So responsive," Damien murmured appreciatively. "I love discovering what makes you feel good." His exploration continued lower, and Natasha felt herself trembling with anticipation and a hint of nervousness. But Damien's touch was sure and skilled, coaxing responses from her body that she had never known were possible. When pleasure began building inside her like a crescendo in music, she clutched at his shoulders, not knowing what was happening, but trusting him to guide her through it. "Let go," Damien whispered against her skin. "Just let yourself feel." The release that washed over her was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if every beautiful piece of music she had ever played had been translated into pure sensation, flowing through her in waves that left her gasping. His name.as she came down from the heights. Damien held her close, pressing tender kisses to her face, and murmuring words of praise and affection. Natasha felt tears slip down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the intensity of what she had just experienced. "Are you all right?" Damien asked with concern, wiping away her tears with gentle thumbs. "More than all right," she managed, her voice hoarse with emotion. I just never knew. I never understood what I was missing. He smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. That was just the beginning, sweetheart. There is so much more I want to show you. As the evening deepened into night, Damien proved the truth of his words. He taught her the rhythms of intimacy with patience and passion, guiding her through each new experience with care. When they finally joined completely, Natasha felt a moment of discomfort that quickly transformed into something profound and overwhelming. They moved together slowly at first. Damien, watching her face carefully, adjusting his movements to her responses. The connection between them deepened with every moment, becoming something that transcended the physical. Mine, Damien whispered against her lips as they climbed toward release together. Tell me you are mine, Natasha. Yours, she gasped, her body trembling as pleasure built again. Always yours. When they reached the peak together, crying out in unison, Natasha felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was not just about losing her innocence or experiencing physical pleasure. This was about finding a connection she had not known she was searching for, about discovering that she was capable of giving and receiving love with her whole heart. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, hearts beating in synchrony. Damien pulled a soft blanket over them and gathered her close, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. How do you feel? He asked softly. Natasha considered the question seriously. I feel alive, she said finally. Like I have been asleep my whole life, and you just woke me up. Everything seems brighter, more vivid, more real. You did the same for me, Damien admitted, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I have been going through the motions of life for years, building my empire, achieving success, but feeling empty inside. Then you walked into my concert hall, and suddenly everything had color again. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their childhoods, dreams for the future, fears they had never voiced to anyone else. Natasha learned that Damien had built his fortune to prove himself worthy after a difficult upbringing. He learned about her single-minded dedication to music and the loneliness that had accompanied her pursuit of excellence. As dawn approached, their desire for each other rekindled. This time, their lovemaking was different, more confident on Natasha's part, more emotionally intense for both of them. She met his passion with her own, no longer shy about expressing what she wanted, how she wanted to be touched. Tell me what you need, Damien urged, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. Everything, Natasha breathed, her nails raking down his back. I need all of you. He gave her exactly that, holding nothing back. And Natasha discovered that pleasure could build upon pleasure, that each time they came together created new depths of connection and intimacy. Morning light filtered through the bedroom windows, painting golden patterns across the tangled sheets. Natasha stirred slowly, awareness returning in stages. She became conscious of warmth surrounding her, of strong arms holding her close, of the steady rhythm of breathing against her hair. Opening her eyes, she found herself curved against Damien's chest, his body a solid presence behind hers. One of his arms was wrapped securely around her waist, holding her as if even in sleep he could not bear to let her go. Carefully, so as not to wake him, Natasha turned in his embrace. In the soft morning light, Damien looked younger, more vulnerable. The lines of stress that bracketed his mouth were smoothed away in sleep, and his dark lashes rested against his cheeks. She studied him with wonder, still hardly believing that this extraordinary night had happened. Her body felt different, awakened in ways both physical and emotional. There were small marks on her skin where his mouth had been, tender reminders of the passion they had shared. As if sensing her gaze, Damien's eyes opened slowly. When he saw her watching him, a slow smile spread across his face. Good morning, beautiful, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. His hand came up to cup her cheek. How are you feeling? Natasha considered the question seriously. Her body was slightly sore in unfamiliar places, but more than that, she felt transformed. I feel like a different person, she admitted. Like I shed an old skin and emerged as someone new. Different, Damien corrected gently. Just more fully yourself. You were always this passionate, sensual woman. You just needed someone to help you discover it. He pulled her closer, and Natasha felt desire stirring again despite the night they had shared. Apparently, once awakened, her body was eager for more of the pleasure Damien could provide. Again? She asked with a shy smile, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Always, he growled, rolling her beneath him. I will never get enough of you, Natasha. Their morning lovemaking was slow and tender, a gentle reaffirmation of the connection forged in the night. Afterwards, Damien led her to his enormous bathroom where they showered together, an experience that felt almost more intimate than what they had shared in bed. Standing under the warm spray, Damien washed her hair with careful attention, his fingers massaging her scalp in a way that made her sigh with contentment. Natasha returned the favor, running soapy hands over his body, no longer shy about touching him. I could get used to this, she murmured as he wrapped her in a plush towel. Good, Damien replied, his eyes serious. Because I am not letting you go, Natasha. What we shared last night was not just about physical attraction. It was something deeper, something I have been searching for my entire life, without realizing it. They dressed in comfortable clothes from his wardrobe. Natasha swimming in one of his shirts paired with soft pants rolled at the ankles. Damien led her to his private terrace where breakfast had been mysteriously prepared, and waiting. As they sat overlooking the city, sharing fresh fruit and pastries, Natasha felt a completeness she had never experienced. But beneath the contentment, questions stirred. What happens now? She asked quietly, setting down her coffee cup. I mean, you are Damien Sterling, one of the most powerful men in the city. I am just a struggling musician who plays in small venues. How does this work in the real world? Damien reached across the table to take her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. First, you are not just anything. You are an extraordinarily talented musician with a gift that moves people deeply. Second, I do not care about the logistics or what others might think. I care about this, about us, about building something real together. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I need to tell you something about myself, something I have never shared with anyone. Will you listen? Natasha nodded, squeezing his hand encouragingly. I grew up in poverty, Damien began, his voice taking on a distant quality. My father abandoned us when I was young, and my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I watched her sacrifice everything for me, and I promised myself that I would become successful enough that she would never have to struggle again. He looked out over the city, his jaw tight. I built my company from nothing, working endless hours, sacrificing relationships and personal happiness for success. By the time I achieved everything I had dreamed of, my mother had passed away. She never got to enjoy the fruits of all that sacrifice. Natasha saw the pain in his eyes and moved to sit beside him, taking both his hands in hers. After that, I threw myself even harder into work, Damien continued. I told myself that building an empire was enough, that success could fill the emptiness inside me. I had relationships, but they were superficial, transactional. I never let anyone close enough to truly see me because I was terrified of being vulnerable again. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. Then you walked into my concert hall, and everything changed. The way you played, the emotion you poured into every note, it reached something inside me that I thought had died with my mother. You reminded me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. Natasha felt tears welling in her eyes. Damien, I am honored that you trust me with this. But you need to know something about me too. I am not good at relationships. I have spent my entire life pushing people away, using my music as a shield against getting hurt. I do not know if I can be what you need. You already are, he said firmly. Your honesty, your vulnerability, your willingness to take a risk on me despite your fears, that is everything I need. I am not looking for perfection, Natasha. I am looking for real, for honest, for someone who sees me as a person rather than a bank account or a status symbol. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, both processing the weight of what they had shared. Finally, Natasha spoke. I am scared, she admitted. Terrified, actually. This intensity between us, it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. What if I fall? What if I am not strong enough to handle this? Damien pulled her onto his lap, cradling her against his chest. "Then I will catch you," he promised. "And if you cannot handle it alone, we will figure it out together." That is what partnership means, Natasha. You do not have to be strong all the time. You can lean on me when you need to, just as I will lean on you. Natasha buried her face against his neck, breathing in his scent, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered. "And that terrifies me more than anything. I know I am falling in love with you," Damien replied, tilting her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "And it terrifies me too. But I would rather be terrified with you than safe and empty without you." Their kiss was tender, filled with promise and the beginning of something that would change both their lives. When they pulled apart, Natasha felt something settle inside her, a sense of rightness that transcended her fears. Over the following weeks, they built a relationship that honored both their careers and their growing love. Damien attended her performances, sitting in the audience and watching with visible pride as she played. In return, Natasha helped him rediscover his passion for music, spending evenings in his concert hall where they would play together, her violin harmonizing with his piano. He introduced her to his foundation and offered her a position as artist in residence, which would provide financial stability while allowing her to focus on her craft. More importantly, he treated her as an equal partner, valuing her opinions and consulting her on decisions that affected them both. Natasha learned to balance her independence with intimacy, discovering that letting someone close did not mean losing herself. Damien showed her that vulnerability was strength, that trust was not weakness, and that love could be both passionate and secure. Their physical connection remained intense, each encounter deepening their bond. Natasha grew more confident in expressing her desires, learning what brought Damien pleasure, discovering the power in her own sensuality. Their lovemaking became a conversation without words, a way of communicating emotions too deep for language. 6 months after that first night, Damien took Natasha back to the concert hall where they had met. The space was transformed, filled with flowers and candlelight. As she stood in the center of the stage, confused and overwhelmed, Damien took her hand. "You asked me once what happens now," he said, his voice echoing through the empty hall. "This is what happens. We build a life together. We create beauty. We face challenges. We grow and change. But we do it side by side." He dropped to one knee, and Natasha felt her heart stop. "Natasha Quinn, you walked into my life and showed me what it means to truly live. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, but the greatest strength. You gave me your trust, your innocence, your heart, and in return, I want to give you everything I am and everything I will ever be. Will you marry me?" Through tears of joy, Natasha pulled him to his feet and kissed him with all the love and passion in her heart. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. As Damien slipped a ring onto her finger and pulled her close, Natasha reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had walked into this concert hall as a woman hiding from life, afraid to risk her heart, convinced that her music was enough to fill the emptiness inside her. She had discovered that true passion required vulnerability, that love demanded courage, and that the greatest art was not created alone, but in connection with another soul. Damien had taught her that being touched was not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, a meeting of hearts that transformed everything. Years later, they would still return to this concert hall, sometimes to perform together, sometimes simply to remember the night that changed everything. They would teach their children about the power of taking risks, about the beauty of honest connection, about the way love could transform two broken people into something whole and beautiful. Their story became proof that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple confession, that the most profound connections start with honesty, and that love, when given freely and received with gratitude, has the power to heal old wounds and create new possibilities. Standing in the concert hall where it all began, wrapped in Damien's arms, with the promise of forever shining on her finger, Natasha understood what she had been missing all those years. She had not been living, merely existing. Now, finally, she was fully alive, ready to embrace every beautiful, terrifying, passionate moment that lay ahead. Together, they had created the most beautiful music of all, the symphony of two hearts beating as one, the harmony of souls perfectly matched, the eternal melody of love, freely given and joyfully received. And unlike any concert that must eventually end, their music would play on forever.